So good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, just depending on where you're from. And thank you for being here. We start off with the third step prayer. Go ahead and do that. God, I offer
God,
myself to
offer
thee,
myself to thee,
to
build with me, and to do with me as
as
thou
thou
wilt.
wilt. Relieve me
Relieve
of
me
the
of the
bondage
bondage
of
of
self.
self, that I may
I
better
better
do
do
thy
thy
will.
will. Take
Take
away
away
my
my
difficulty.
difficulties, that victory
Victory
over
over
them
them
may
bear
bear witness to those that would help of thy
thy
power,
power,
thy
thy
love,
love,
and thy
and thy
way of
way of
life.
life.
May I
May
do
I
thy
do thy
will
will
always.
always. Excellent. All right, folks, we are on page 10 of our big book, and we're going to start at near the top of the page, and Bill is going to do some reading, and we'll both then talk after each of the paragraphs as we go along. So, Bill, if you start there at he talked for hours, please.
Okay, we're on the top of page 10. He talked for hours. Childhood memories rose before me. I could almost hear the sound of the preacher's voice as I sat on still Sundays, way over there on the hillside. There was that proffered temperance pledge I never signed. My grandfather's good-natured contempt of some church folk and their doings. His insistence that the spheres really had their music, but his denial of the preacher's right to tell him how he must listen. His fearlessness as he spoke of these things just before he died. These recollections welled up from the past. They made me swallow hard.
Yeah, so this is Bill, and there used to be a pledge or a promise that you would not drink, and Bill obviously refused to sign that, and Alfie, and on top of that, at the same time, decided that he was pretty much done with church, and he's talking here a little bit about his grandfather's good-natured contempt of some church folk and their doings. I'm sure that had some influence on him, and he's kind of followed his grandfather's lead there. So it's interesting that they bring this up, at this point, and of when Bill was such a young person at the time, and but it does have some foreboding as to the future that Bill obviously is going through his story here. Bill?
Okay, look, that wartime day in old Winchester Cathedral came back again. I had always believed in a power greater than myself. I had often pondered these things. I was not an atheist. Few people really are. For that means blind faith in the strange proposition that this universe originated in a cipher and aimlessly rushes nowhere. My intellectual heroes, the chemists, the astronomers, even the evolutionists, suggested vast laws and forces at work. Despite contrary interdictions, I had little doubt that a mighty purpose and rhythm underlay all. How could there be so much precise and immutable law and no intelligence? I simply had to believe in a spirit of the universe who knew neither time nor limitation. But that was as far as I had gone.
Yeah, so one of the words there, immutable law, is that it's always going to be there, is another way of saying it. So immutable being that it's always going to be there. But he's admitting that he's believed in a power greater than himself, but not necessarily has made the connection to what he might call that power, as we find out in some of his writings and that type of thing. High finance was a higher power for Bill, and obviously that was before, it was during his drinking career, and before he decided to or was able to find that power that's necessary in order to stop drinking. He's admitting here that he's more of a science-oriented type person, as opposed to more spiritual. So he's struggling with that at this point, and he's admitting that he's got to believe in the spirit of the universe. So he's warming to that idea in order to be able to do that. So, Bill?
Yeah, if you notice, he mentions here at the beginning of what we read in Winchester Cathedral. This is the second time he mentions it. He's going to mention Winchester Cathedral 3 times in his story. So obviously it had some kind of an impact on him. It was something that he remembered, because this was like 21 years before he wrote his story when he was in Winchester Cathedral. So something happened there. And a lot of people believe Bill had some kind of a spiritual awakening when he was in Winchester Cathedral. All right, we're on the last paragraph on page 10. With ministers and the world's religions, I parted right there. When they talked of a God personal to me, who was love, superhuman strength, and direction, I became irritated, and my mind snapped shut at such a theory.
Yeah, and so he's struggling again, and obviously he's resisting this idea of God and love, superhuman strength, and direction. A lot of people that come into AA have also admit the fact that they are not necessarily aligned with a religious God, and have a hard time, kind of connecting the spiritual and higher power kind of thing that they've got to work through in order to get the power that they need. And that I've heard time and again, a lot of people have the same reaction when God is brought up, is that their mind snaps shut, they resist it, and are frustrated or irritated by it. Bill?
Yeah, this is giving us a little bit of the mindset of Bill here. It's showing us how he was thinking. He was okay with the spirit of the universe, but he didn't like listening to anything about God. He didn't want anything to do with that. All right, we're on the top of page 11. To Christ I conceded the certainty of a great man, not too closely followed by those who claimed him. His moral teachings most excellent. For myself, I had adopted those parts which seemed convenient and not too difficult. The rest I disregarded. The wars which have been fought. Okay.
No, go ahead, Bill. I'm sorry.
Okay. The wars which have been fought, the burnings and chicanery that religious disputes had facilitated, made me sick. I honestly doubted whether, on balance, the religions of mankind had done any good. Judging from what I had seen in Europe and since, the power of God in human affairs was negligible. The brotherhood of man, a grim jest. If there was a devil, he seemed boss universal, and he certainly had me.
Sure. So he's again admitting his idea of God and what he thinks of God, and thinks with regard to the stuff he saw during the war, and the fact that he didn't think that God was really that involved in the human affairs of things. The burnings and chicanery. Another thing for chicanery is trickery that religious dispute had facilitated. So he's talking about, some of the wars that had been fought over religion, and the problems that had come out of that. And he's really not turned on to God at all at this point, at all. Bill?
Yeah, Bill is at the point here where he's taking what he wants and he's leaving the rest. He doesn't want to go along with everything that he was taught or everything that he was brought up with. He just wants to believe what he wants to believe. And this is the only place in the book where they mention Christ, God, and the devil, all in these 2 paragraphs here. So And basically, he's just saying what he believes in, and he thinks the devil has him, if there is a devil. All right, the next paragraph. My friend sat before me, and he made the point-blank declaration that God had done for him what he could not do for himself. His human will had failed. Doctors had pronounced him incurable. Society was about to lock him up. Like myself, he had admitted complete defeat. Then he had in effect been raised from the dead, suddenly taken from the scrap heap to a level of life better than the best he had ever known. Had this power originated in him? Obviously it had not. There had been no more power in him than there was in me at that minute, and this was none at all.
Wow. So Bill is admitting there's no power in him, but he's talking about Ebby and the fact that Ebby had gone through a similar kind of process of phases, I would call it. And, you know, he's incurable. His human will had failed. And he had admitted complete defeat. So Ebby had really done a proper step one when he admitted his complete defeat over alcohol. And then having this spiritual experience that we've talked about, or we'll talk about more, and just grabbing him and pulling him up, giving him that inner strength that he actually needs in order to be able to stop drinking and stay stopped. Bill?
Yeah, this is when Ebby was talking to Bill at his home, and like it says here, Ebby admitted complete defeat. That could be a reference to step one. Ebby knew that he was powerless over alcohol, what he was trying to do. And the next paragraph says that had this power originated in him? Obviously it had not. So he knows that this came from somewhere else. It's not human power. He realizes that there's more than that. And at that minute, he had no power at all. So again, that's Bill kind of admitting step one. So you can see the reference there to step one in this. Okay, the next paragraph. That floored me. It began to look as though religious people were right after all. There was something at work in the human heart which had done the impossible. My ideas about miracles were drastically revised right then. Never mind the musty past. Here sat a miracle directly across the kitchen table. He shouted great tidings. I saw that my friend was much more than inwardly reorganized. He was on a different footing. Its roots grasped new soil.
Yeah, so so Bill is actually witnessing Ebby and his bright outlook on things, and showing that there is something to this idea of potentially that the religious people might be right after all. So he's starting to be swayed, if you will, and he recognizes is that it's something that comes from internal, so something deep inside. I think it's interesting, he calls it miracles here. I think it's a good word. That having that spiritual experience is nothing short of a miracle. And once it has happened, it's a life-changing event. And he's witnessing that within Ebby as he's sitting there at the kitchen table across from him that night. Bill?
Yeah, Ebby is showing the difference that he went through to Bill. Bill is seeing this, and Bill is starting to go along with it. Okay, we're on the top of page 12 at this point. Despite the living example of my friend, there remained in me the vestiges of my old prejudice. The word God still aroused a certain antipathy. When the thought was expressed that there might be a God personal to me, this feeling was intensified. I didn't like the idea. I could go for such conceptions as creative intelligence, universal mind, or spirit of nature, but I resisted the thought of the czar of the heavens, however loving his sway might be. I have since talked with scores of men who felt the same way. My friend suggested what then seemed a novel idea. He said, "Why don't you choose your own conception of God?"
Wow. So we're getting into this place where he's still resisting. He's still admitting the fact that he is having a hard time with this creative intelligence or universal mind or spirit of nature. And his resistance to it is still there. He has, when talking about God, he still has a certain dislike. That's another word for antipathy. So, and he's still hanging on to that old belief structure that God is nowhere and not going to be helpful to me. So with that, he's been that they posed the question, why don't you choose your own conception of God? And that's going to have an impact on him much more so than trying to relate to a God that's relating to that others relate to in mass. So this is going to be a big change for Bill. Bill?
Yeah, this last line that I read, why don't you choose your own conception of God? That's probably one of the most important things that they put in this book. In other words, you can believe whatever you want to believe. You don't have to believe what I believe, and I don't have to believe what you believe. Whatever your own conception means your idea. Whatever your idea that the word God stands for is fine. You can use that. Okay, the next paragraph. That statement hit me hard. It melted the icy intellectual mountain in whose shadow I had lived and shivered many years. I stood in the sunlight at last. It was only a matter of being willing to believe in a power greater than myself. Nothing more was required of me to make my beginning. I saw that growth could start from that point. Upon a foundation of complete willingness, I might build what I saw in my friend. Would I have it? Of course I would.
Sure. So this is basically Bill doing his step 2. It was only a matter of being willing to believe in a power greater than myself. Nothing more was required of me to make my beginning. And it's powerful to say that, but it's also easy to kind of adhere to or accept. And I think that that's one of the things that is so important with regard to a newcomer in AA, and that is that they don't have to, embrace everything as complete. They just need to be willing at this point in their process of going through the steps, willing to believe that there is a greater power than themselves. For Bill, it's kind of working through that spiritual moment for him. He's having that happen to him. He's kind of saying that in this first statement here, where he melted the icy intellectual mountain in whose shadow I had lived and shivered for many years. Things were starting to open up for him, and that is what is the beginning and or his definition of when he was starting to have his spiritual experience. And then at the very end there that Bill read, would I have it? Of course I would. That's working towards a step 3. So we've basically gone through the first couple of steps in detail, and he's embracing this idea, and having done so, is really kind of doing his step 3. Bill?
Okay, we're on the bottom of page 12. Thus was I convinced that God is concerned with us humans when we want him enough. At long last I saw, I felt, I believed. Scales of pride and prejudice fell from my eyes. A new world came into view. The real significance of my experience in the cathedral burst upon me. For a brief moment, I had needed and wanted God. There had been a humble willingness to have him with me, and he came. But soon the sense of his presence had been blotted out, by worldly clamors, mostly those within myself. And so it has been ever since. How blind I had been.
Yeah. So this is kind of I'm going to call it the white light experience for Bill. He's getting the idea that God is actually something that he could embrace and understand to the extent that he would choose it as his own conception of it. And the scales of pride and prejudice fell from his eyes. Obviously, he's having that bright white light moment, and a new world came into view. So this is really kind of just in written form, Bill's spiritual experience. The experience of his time at the cathedral comes back to him and has had an impact on him, and his humble or willingness to have him with me. Bill is exhibiting some humility here, and which is good. And then he's starting to feel that presence of that higher power, and that certainly has getting him to be convinced that he had been closed off for so long, and now having been able to open up to it, there's a new feeling that he's going through. Bill?
Yeah, Bill is starting to have his, if you want to say, spiritual awakening at this point. He's starting to wake up and realize that the things that Ebby is telling him is right. And it talks about the cathedral again here. It's the third time he mentions that cathedral. Obviously, the cathedral had some sort of an impact on Bill. Because again, he was in the cathedral 21 years before he wrote his story. So something happened to him. Most people believe he had some kind of a spiritual awakening or a spiritual experience when he was in Winchester Cathedral. And he talks about the presence of God was blocked out by the worldly clamors, mostly within myself. In other words, that's the noise in his head. All the garbage that's going on in our head, this, that, if this person says this, I'll say that, and I'll do this, and he'll do that, and all these fights and stuff that were going on, that blocks us off. And that's what's blocking him off, is all the worldly clamors. All right, we're on the top of page 13 now. At the hospital, I was separated from alcohol for the last time. Treatment seemed wise, or I showed signs of delirium tremens. There I humbly offered myself to God as I then understood him, to do with me as he would. I placed myself unreservingly under his care and direction. I admitted for the first time that of myself I was nothing, and without him I was lost. I ruthlessly faced my sins and became willing to have my newfound friend take them away root and branch. I have not had a drink since.
So, a couple of things here. There's some discussion, well, I guess that he was at Towns Hospital, decided to check himself in, and because of the fact that he was going through the DTs, as I understand, the last Bill's last drink and or his sobriety date is December 11th of 1934, and this would be the I think if we look at history, this is like the fourth time that he had gone to the hospital for treatment for alcohol, and he's talking about Dr. Silkworth, that he placed himself under the care of and God as well, and then that care and direction that he got from his higher power, God, is basically given him the ability to ruthlessly face his sins, and became willing to have his newfound friend, his higher power, take them root and branch. That's obviously coming up on steps 6 and 7. So this is a good thing for him. We're approaching step 6 and 7. I apologize. And so Bill?
Yeah, this was the last time that Bill was treated in the hospital. He was there. He was separated from alcohol for the last time, and he was showing signs of delirium tremens. So they kept him there for a while. And then the next paragraph says, "There I humbly offered myself to God." That's the equivalent of our step 3. The beginning of the step 3 prayer says, "God, I offer myself to thee." He's offering himself to God here. So that's the equivalent of our step 3. There was no step 3 at the time, but he's doing the same basic thing that we do when we do step 3. And then it says, "I ruthlessly faced my sins." That's step 4. In other words, he took an inventory of himself. I don't believe he did a written inventory. I think he just did it in his head. And then it says, I was willing to have my newfound friend take them away root and branch. That's step 6 and 7. And notice friend has a capital F in it, so that's an indication of his higher power as his new friend. Okay, the next paragraph. My schoolmate visited me, and I fully acquainted him with my problems and deficiencies. We made a list of people I had hurt or toward whom I felt resentment. I expressed my entire willingness to approach these individuals, admitting my wrong. Never was I to be critical of them. I was to write all such matters to the utmost of my ability. I was to test my thinking by the new God consciousness within. Common sense would thus become uncommon sense. I was to sit quietly when in doubt, asking only for direction and strength to meet my problems as he would have me. Never was I to pray for myself, except as my request for my usefulness to others. Then only might I expect to receive, but that would be in great measure.
Yeah, so he's got Ebby visiting him, and he does what he basically is acquainting him with his problems and deficiencies, which is again, the steps weren't in place, but that is doing a step 5. He made a list of people I'd hurt and toward whom I felt resentment. That's his step 8. And then he expressing his entire willingness to approach these individuals, admitting his wrong, and in the process of doing that, which is essentially step 9. So I think it's important to note there that he didn't complete his step 9 necessarily, just started his step 9. I think a step 9 is really one of those constant things that you do, and it takes some time to get through your list of people and resentments, and then once you're through it, from time to time, I think you find yourself potentially having to do more of your step 9, step 8 and 9 as you go through life. And to get these things all straightened out to the best of his ability, his testing his thinking of his new God consciousness, common sense would then become uncommon sense. It was to sit quietly when in doubt, asking for direction and strength to meet my problems. This is a good step 11. This idea that you don't pray for yourself except for the assistance of others is an important thing to remember when you are praying. Pray for the strength to be able to face a particular task or type of resentment, and but never to pray for your benefit is one of the mantras that they have with regard to praying as far as AA is concerned. Bill, you got something to add?
Oh yeah, like you said, this is Bill going through what we would consider steps 5 through 11. That's basically what he did. And that second paragraph where it says, I was to test my thinking by the new God consciousness within. A lot of people believe that's the equivalent of our step 10. And so he did step 10, then he went into step 11. And again, the steps weren't written at this time, but this is the process or the method that Bill followed. And you can equate this to our different steps. Okay, we're on the bottom of page 13 here. My friend promised when these things were done, I would enter upon a new relationship with my Creator, that I would have the elements of a way of living which answered all my problems. Belief in the power of God, plus enough willingness, honesty, and humility to establish and maintain the new order of things were the essential requirements. Simple but not easy. A price had to be paid. It meant destruction of self-centeredness. I must turn in all things to the Father of light who presides over us all.
Yeah. So as their focus on self goes away, and he's working through this. I underlined this willingness, honesty, and humility, which is so important in your day-to-day living and the way that you approach things, and your belief in your higher power in order to help you. This is really kind of going into the first part of step 12. And then when he does say simple but not easy, a price had to be paid, this is him referring to what would have been his step 12, and that is to take it back and give it back by going out and searching out other alcoholics and helping them. But he's really doing this on a kind of a personal level at this point. This realization that he's got this newfound power and it's changed in the way that he's going to live his life. Got a note here. It's you only have to change one thing. That's everything. So that's kind of a thing that I look at every once in a while, and it makes me smile. But Bill?
Okay, we're on the second new paragraph on the top of page 14. These were revolutionary and drastic proposals, but the moment I fully accepted them, the effect was electric. There was a sense of victory, followed by such a peace and serenity as I had never known. There was utter confidence. I felt lifted up as though the great clean wind of a mountaintop blew through and through. God comes to most men gradually, but his impact on me was sudden and profound. For a moment I was alarmed and called my friend the doctor to ask if I were still sane. He listened in wonder as I talked.
Yeah, so this is really Bill kind of formally saying that he is having his spiritual experience. This sudden and profound change in himself is really the defining moment that he is saying that he's having this spiritual experience. For him, as we've shown, and we'll talk about more so later on, is that there are two types of spiritual experiences: the ones that are sudden and such as what Bill has gone through, and then there's others that are gradual over time that come to you in small bits, and then finally the change happens. I underlined that these were revolutionary and drastic proposals, but the moment I fully accepted them, the effect was electric. And that's kind of the idea here. It's really kind of letting go of your prejudices and your resentments and resistance to everything, and opening up your heart and your mind and your soul to this idea that there is this higher power out there that can enter into your life and really help you do what needs to be done. And there is an uplifting feeling to it, this kind of electric and uplifting feeling that Bill is expressing here, and it gives you that new confidence that you lacked before with regard to that ability to stop drinking and stay stopped. Bill?
Yeah. Again, like you said, this is Bill describing his spiritual experience. And it says, the moment I fully accepted them, the effect was electric. So Ebby explained these proposals. We didn't have steps yet, but that would be our steps, the proposals. And Ebby explained the spiritual exercises that he was doing with the Oxford group. And as soon as Bill accepted them and was willing to do them and started going through with them, that's when the effect was electric. That's when he had his spiritual experience or his white light experience. And he thought he was crazy when that happened, so he had to call the doctor. That would have been Dr. Silkworth. And he asked the doctor if he was still sane. Okay, we're in the middle of page 14. Finally, he shook his head, saying, "Something has happened to you I don't understand, but you had better hang on to it. Anything is better than the way you were." The good doctor now sees many men who have had such experiences. He knows that they are real. While I lay in the hospital, the thought came that there were thousands of hopeless alcoholics who might be glad to have what had been so freely given me. Perhaps I could help some of them. They in turn might work with others.
So finally, so the doctor is admitting that something has happened, and it's not something that he can explain scientifically. But nonetheless, he's telling Bill that he should stay with it and embrace it. So it does kind of go into the future here, where the doctor does see many men who have such experiences. He's watched it time and again. Dr. Silkworth does become this great supporter of this idea and concept of AA's process of having that spiritual experience, and that being the one key element to getting people sober and having them recover. And then he goes on to begin his thought process of what we are talking to as a reference to step 12, and that is that taking this message and this idea and expressing it to other alcoholics that would need help and going forward. So there's another reference here, as there are many in this book, that we talk about the step 12 and taking this to other people. Bill?
This here is the second part of step 12. Try to carry this message to other alcoholics. Bill got the idea while he was in the hospital that he needed to give this freely what had been given him. So he has to give it away to keep it. He started to understand that. Okay, we're at the bottom of page 14. My friend had emphasized the absolute necessity of demonstrating these principles in all my affairs. Particularly was it imperative to work with others as he worked with me. Faith without works was dead, he said, and how appallingly true for the alcoholic. For if an alcoholic failed to perfect and enlarge his spiritual life through work and self-sacrifice for others, he could not survive the certain trials and low spots ahead. If he did not work, he would surely drink again. And if he drank, he would surely die. Then faith would be dead indeed. With us, it is just like that.
Yep. And so the idea here is the recipe for faith is that open-mindedness and a willingness. So that's important to note here in regards to that. The idea here again is just reinforced that the absolute necessity of demonstrating these principles in all his affairs is showing that this isn't just in working with other people and only for times that he's trying to continue his support, his work to stop drinking and stay stopped. It's supposed to be that you become this different person, that you approach life as a whole in a much different way, and having that faith is important. The idea here is he talks about particularly is it was imperative to work with others, and so it's a giving back, as Bill just said. You know, you got to give it away to keep it, and that's if you just do it just to yourself and only yourself, you're not going to get very far. but you need to be able to take it and carry it to other people. Bill?
Yeah, this first sentence here in this paragraph is the third part of step 12. Practice these principles in all our affairs. In the book, it says demonstrate these principles in all my affairs. But that's a reference to what we call step 12. And the last line on that page is giving us instructions on how to stay spiritually fit. Or if an alcoholic fails to perfect and enlarge his spiritual life through work and self-sacrifice for others, that's how we perfect and enlarge our spiritual life. That's how we stay spiritually fit, through work and self-sacrifice for others. And that means trying to help another alcoholic stay sober. And then it says, if he did not work, he would surely drink again. That's a warning. If we don't do this, if you just go through this process and then that's it, you don't do anything else, there's a good chance you're probably going to drink again. We have to keep doing this. We have to keep carrying this message to other people. It's like if you have diabetes, you don't take one shot of insulin and then you're good forever. You got to take your medicine every single day. And this is our medicine, carrying the message, or what it says here, through work and self-sacrifice for others. Okay, we're on page 15, the first paragraph on page 15. My wife and I abandoned ourselves with enthusiasm to the idea of helping other alcoholics to a solution of their problem. It was fortunate, for my old business associates remained skeptical for a year and a half, during which I found little work. I was not too well at the time and was plagued by waves of self-pity and resentment. This sometimes nearly drove me back to drink. But I soon found that when all other measures failed, work with another alcoholic would save the day. Many times I have gone to my old hospital in despair. On talking to a man there, I would be amazingly lifted up and set on my feet. It is a design for living that works in rough going.
Right. So here's Bill working through those pangs of emotion and that resentment. Certainly all of us have been there. I know I have, and that is the first several months that I was recovering and not drinking. There were periods of time that would pop up that I would think about drinking, that I would be upset with myself because I had failed at my ability to control my drinking like normal people. I was frustrated by it. And then just like it says here with he found when he talked to other people that that melted away, that the frustration and the anger and the resentment went away, and he found his strength again and was able to continue to not drink. So he does say it was fortunate for my old business associates remained skeptical for a year and a half. He's basically saying there that it was a good thing that he didn't find work, because I think he's saying here is that if he did find work and he wasn't given the opportunity to really focus on his sobriety and his recovery, that he was probably going to drink again and he'd fall into his old ways. So having not much work, if at all, during that time gave him the opportunity to really focus on his recovery and actually be quite successful at it. So as long as he was able to talk with other people and about their alcoholism, or at least talk about his alcoholism to them, he was basically doing fine and able to recover. Bill?
Yeah, this is important stuff here. Bill's giving us instructions on how to stay sober. Remember, this is after Bill had his spiritual experience. The spiritual experience can get you sober, but it's not going to keep you sober. It has a shelf life. It wears off. If you stop doing the work in this program, it's going to wear off and it's not going to work. And his resentments and self-pity nearly drove him back to drink. And when all other measures failed, work with another alcoholic would save the day. That means if you double up on your meetings, you call your sponsor, you pick up the coffee cups, you mop the floor, whatever you're going to do. That's all good stuff to do. but none of that stuff worked. When all other measures failed, working with an alcoholic is what kept Bill from picking up a drink again. And the way he did it, he went back to the old hospital, which would have been the town's hospital, and he started talking to people that were in there, telling them what he did to stay sober by trying to help somebody else. That's what helped him. That's what kept him going. Okay, we're on the last paragraph on page 15. We commenced to make many fast friends, and a fellowship has grown up among us, which is a wonderful thing to feel a part. The joy of living we really have, even under pressure and difficulty. I have seen hundreds of families set their feet in a path that really goes somewhere. Having seen the most impossible domestic situations righted, feuds and bitterness of all sorts wiped out, I have seen men come out of asylums and resume a vital place in the lives of their families and communities. Business and professional men have regained their standing. There is scarcely any form of trouble and misery which has not been overcome among us. In one Western city and its environs, there are 1,000 of us and our families. We meet frequently so that newcomers may find the fellowship they seek. At these informal gatherings, one may often see 50 to 200 persons. We are growing in numbers and power.
Yep. And so a couple of things here. There's a lot of promises in this paragraph. First one is we commence to make many fast friends, and a fellowship has grown up among us. The next one is the joy of living we really have. We really have, even under pressure and difficulty. The third promise is I've seen hundreds of families set their feet in the path that really goes somewhere. Fourth promise, have seen the most impossible domestic situations righted. The fifth promise is the feuds and bitterness of all sorts wiped out. Sixth promise is I have seen men come out of the asylums and resume a vital place in their lives of their families and communities. The seventh promise here is the business and professional men have regained their standing. And then the eighth promise is that there is scarcely any form of trouble and misery which has not been overcome among us. So what's important here is that with this ability to have this spiritual experience, that these people that are alcoholics are able to basically return to life and lead something of a normal life. A lot of the problems and trials and tribulations are all melted away, and in doing so, they see a lot of things get better in a big way. They also obviously meet frequently and finding newcomers, and some of them getting to as many as 200 people. We're growing in numbers and power. There's a note at the bottom here. As of 2016, which is the printing of my book, there was 117,700 groups worldwide. But now in 2019, which is the last time they've counted that we've got it published, there was 120,800 groups. So as I understand it, that things are kind of plateauing, if you will, but there are a number of people there that have these groups and are reaching out to newcomers all the time and experiencing some of these promises that Bill expresses here. Bill?
Yeah, you notice on the bottom of page 15, it says, we meet frequently so that newcomers may find the fellowship they seek. This book was directed at newcomers. They didn't write this book for people that were already sober. They wrote this book for people that wanted to get sober and didn't know how to do it. So this is directed towards the newcomer. And that's basically why we have meetings for the newcomers. Because by helping the newcomers, that's what keeps us sober. Just like when Bill said on page 15, work with another alcoholic would save the day. When we work with a newcomer, that keeps us sober. That's why it's directed towards newcomers. Okay, we're on page 16, on the first new paragraph. An alcoholic in his cups is an unloving creature. Our struggles with them are variously strenuous, comic, and tragic. One poor chap committed suicide in my home. He could not or would not see our way of life. There is, however, a vast amount of fun about it all. I suppose some would be shocked at our seeming worldliness and levity. But just underneath, there is a deadly earnestness. Faith has to work 24 hours a day in and through us, or we perish. Most of us feel we need look no further for utopia. We have it with us right here and now. Each day, my friends, simple talk in our kitchen multiplies itself in a widening circle of peace on earth and goodwill to men. And then at the bottom it says, Bill W., co-founder of AA, died January 24th, 1971.
Yeah, and just so that everybody kind of has the math here, he was sober for 36 years, 1 month and 13 days once he finished his drinking career. The person that we're talking about that committed suicide in Bill's home is a man by the name of Bill Cousins, and as I understand it, he stuck his head in a gas oven and asphyxiated. He's talking too is that some people are a little alarmed at the seriousness of alcoholism and the fact that there's all these problems and everything. How can we be jovial and in good spirits? And certainly that's an important element of sobriety and recovery. Without that, it would be why would we capture newcomers? Because they'd be saying essentially, well, if nobody's happy, why do I want to do this? So it's a good thing that that is something that can be, I would call it a promise that once you've decided to recover, found that inner strength, that you look at it in a positive manner and in a bright way, and that is a good thing, and that should be shared. Bill?
Yeah, this is basically the end here of Bill's story, and he's basically telling how what was going on in his life after he got sober. Like Leo mentioned, one guy killed himself in his home. I mean, these are things that happen. Sometimes people just don't make it. They get to the point where they can't take it anymore, and apparently that's what happened to this guy. And it's telling us faith has to work 24 hours a day in and through us, or we perish. In other words, we have to have faith in this stuff, and we have to keep doing it, because if we don't, we're going to perish. And for us to perish, that means we're going to go back out and get drunk. So basically, the talk that Ebby gave him, that multiplies itself many times in this widening circle of peace on earth and goodwill to men. So in other words, by keep on following the instructions that Ebby gave to Bill, everything started to get better. And then, unfortunately, Bill got sick and died. He died of emphysema. He was a lifelong smoker. He was considered a chain smoker. So if you smoke, it would be a good idea to quit, because that's what killed Bill. And actually, that's what killed Ebby also. Both of them died from emphysema because they were both heavy smokers. Okay, that's all I got. Thanks for letting me share.
Bill, thank you for participating. We're going to go ahead and stop there today. We'll close things out with the Serenity Prayer, and we'll open things up after that. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. All right.